Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.
Hello, my name is Andrew Faas, and welcome to Following the Golden Rule.
And I'm Jay Remer, and for 26 weeks, Andy and I will be discussing the ABCs of building character. We've done 11 episodes so far. Today our 12th is on L is for loyal. Loyal appears to be a multi-dimensional characteristic, if ever there was one. And how do you define loyal?
Well, basically define loyal in terms of, it is multidimensional, yes, and it is also somewhat complex, and it's based on the relationships that people have with either an institution or a person or a cause. And so in retail, loyalty is very important relative to the enterprise and its success or failure. What we're going to focus here on is more loyalty that we have with each other, and loyalty with the institutions that we're directly involved in. And it's a really commitment people make to support, to defend, and protect. And you know, it should be very clear-sighted and not blind. And it's really based on the level of trust that loyalty is bestowed on. Sarah Chaplin in Is Loyalty a Virtue kind of captures it in terms of defining that complexity. The last 2 years in American politics have revealed our very different senses of loyalty, from its purpose to its objects. We are seeing with unsettling clarity the limits of fidelity to a person, to a faction, and to an agenda. And we are beginning to search for some better place to direct it. And I think that really describes the dynamics that are going on, and not just in American politics. It's pretty much in every institution that people are associated with. And that search is something that searching for this is what people are craving for in terms of wanting to be loyal, wanting to believe in something, wanting to support something. But what is the missing ingredient is what we're talking about in this series, and that's that ethic of reciprocity. In the introduction, I identified myself as a disgruntled old man with much to be disgruntled about. But as we've gone through this series, it's kind of clarified for me more why I am disgruntled. And I'm disgruntled because what I see is an erosion of trust that we have in each other, and certainly the erosion of trust in most of our institutions, if not every institution. And that has manifested itself in an erosion of loyalty.
So in your TED Talk a few years ago, you mentioned about being betrayed. Would you like to share that story with us?
Sure, it's a matter of public record, so, so it's out there. But I was retaliated against for blowing the whistle on a corrupt executive. And the board, for a variety of reasons, one in particular is that they were afraid of the executive that was identified or exposed. And ironically, I blew the whistle out of loyalty to the institution and loyalty to the board of directors, many of who I influenced in placing on the board. And that was a betrayal. But what hurt me more was people who I thought were loyal to me for a variety of reasons I found out later, shunned me and did not support me, and that was one of the most horrible periods in my entire life. And again, it was because loyalty was not reciprocated, and that hurt beyond what I can express in words.
What is your take on the loyalty that Trump appears to have with so many people? To me, it's baffling. But do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I do, and it's interesting that in my book I have the shortest chapter on record, and it is titled "A Definition of a Bully," and it's 2 words long: Donald Trump. And that was written 7 years ago, well before he even entered politics. And the Republican Party is now the party of Trump, and there are 4 groups that support him, and the reasons that they support him vary. So for his base, and for many of his base, they look up to him because of their immense distrust in the establishment. And they are looking at him as a savior. And some within that group believe that he truly is the Messiah. And so that is a loyalty that they have to the individual, and it's based on religious belief. The other group are the group that keep him propped up, and that group are not necessarily being loyal, and this is where the definition of loyalty comes in. And often people misinterpret obedience to loyalty. So they are basically being obedient. And obedient because they are afraid of what he could do based on what he has done relative to throwing anybody who is disloyal under the bus.
Right.
The other group are the GOP caucus, and precious few, Jeff Flake and Mitt Romney in particular, have blindly followed him. And the reason, in my mind, it's based on some speculation and some evidence, that the reason that they support him is that Trump and his allies have something on every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a dynamic that occurs in many organizations.
Okay.
And I was involved with one organization, and the CEO had the goods on every board member and every senior executive.
Oh my.
And therefore we're obedient to them,
Right.
for fear that their transgressions would get exposed.
Mm-hmm. What you're describing, Andy, reminds me of a blog that you wrote called Why Bullies Win. Would you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Now, I'm not going to reread the article itself, but I would encourage people to read it, and it can be found under Andrew Faas, Why Bullies Win.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote about this small community where a single bully totally alienated the town, and using common bullying tactics, and made people choose between her and the people that she had targeted.
Mm-hmm.
And the methods she employed were fairly characteristic of bully. They deflect, they discredit, they deny, they use the common characteristics of bullying.
Mm-hmm.
And the motivation is to get power and control.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it was to up her standing in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I wrote it, it is a microcosm of what is going on in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that happens and is happening in, whether it be a family unit or in the most institutions, or entire countries. And it was one of the most viewed blogs that I wrote. I wrote it on September 13th, or September 11th of last year,
Mm-hmm.
and it could have been written today.
Mm-hmm.
And what I describe in there, actually, there's been even more regression relative to bullies winning,
Mm-hmm.
and the repercussions of that, which are the extreme polarization that we're going through, the hate that is out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I should also say it's the last piece I wrote on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because after that, I basically gave up on writing about the topic, because I didn't think that there was much more I could add
Mm-hmm.
in convincing the influencers to change, but more important, the bystanders to put up their hand and say, enough's enough already, and we need to defend, protect, and support the people who are being impacted by bullying.
Mm-hmm. In preparing for this segment, we talked about the negative impact that disloyalty has on brand value. Would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So last week we talked about inviting people out of the business, and today that is occurring in a way to an extent that was almost unimaginable even a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And it's just started. And what what amazes me even today, with all of the sensitivity around inclusion and diversity and anti-harassment and social responsibility, it's still used as a first resort rather than a last resort. Uh-huh. And it never ceases to amaze me that organizations, when they go through this restructuring, don't appreciate that their employees are customers as well. Mm-hmm. And they have family members who are customers as well, and they have friends who are customers as well. And they, by doing that, it's not following the ethic of reciprocity, mm-hmm. in terminating people who up to that point have been loyal to the institution. Mm-hmm. And as customers, that is remembered. Mm-hmm. And I come from retail, and we looked at it that way and mm-hmm. said, listen, if we do something like this, it will affect our brand value. Mm-hmm. And we've got to be viewed as being loyal to our employees, because that's what we expect of them. Loyalty is going to be severely tested over the next number of months, if not years, because of the changing economic and the political pressures. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be seeing more and more organizations collapse, and new economies emerge. Mm-hmm. My bet is that it's going to be based on more of a local economy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think that most people work for huge organizations. Well, actually, the majority of people work for small enterprises, small businesses. Mm-hmm. And as people migrate out of the larger urban areas, which we're seeing in cities like New York and Toronto, they are going to be going to more smaller communities, and that's going to give rise to even a growing smaller businesses will drive that economy. They will only be successful, though, if people in the community are loyal to them. Mm-hmm. That is, the ultimate ethic of reciprocity. Mm-hmm. So our relationship, I as a small business person is going to want to come into your community, but I need people to support me.
That's right.
And in terms of getting back to the brand value and organizations losing that, I think the larger organizations are going to rue the day that they took the approaches they did over the last decade and a few decades before that, in terms of all of the rewards, disproportionate amount of the rewards, i.e. 90% of the rewards, go to the larger enterprises. Mm-hmm. And smaller businesses, and certainly employees in both smaller and larger businesses, their position has gone down versus up.
You know, this is a very interesting community for that. It's what one might refer to as sort of an entrepreneurial movement almost. But I am reminded of when I restored the Windsor House. And it was a very large, complicated, over a long period of time project. And what surprised me the most was that every single skill that I needed, which was vast, I found right in Charlotte County. And when I went to decide who was I going to hire to do a particular task, I always picked the smaller group of people, the smallest little company. And they were completely stunned that I would use that approach. And it changed so many people's lives for the good. And so many other people picked up on supporting them too. So community loyalty, which is what you're talking about, is alive and well here in St. Andrews. And I think given the current economic situation, it's going to hopefully just continue.
Well, I think it will, and it's a great example of that, what I refer to as a sense of community. And it's where people are supported. And again, like we talked about in other characteristics, support manifests itself in many ways. But it's making sure that you provide that level of support and that it becomes reciprocal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually made me feel wonderful about the project in general. It's very definitely a golden rule kind of a thing.
Yeah. What I think people, and now I am talking to the influencers, what the influencers, particularly in larger institutions, need to understand and remember is something that is emerging, and that's called cancel culture.
Okay.
And cancel culture is withdrawing support for public figures or companies after they do something. And we are and we will be a consumer-based economy. Mm-hmm. And fundamental to that is consumers require the financial means to have people support the economy. Mm-hmm. And what organizations and the influencers need to recognize is people will remember how they were dealt with. Mm-hmm. By the various people that they rely on. Mm-hmm. To survive and prosper. Mm-hmm. And there's one example that I'm going to use, and it's related to a recent situation where a small business person, I think he had something in the vicinity of 16 employees, very successful up until COVID. Mm-hmm. And when he approached the bank that he's worked with for the 27 years that he's been in business, mm-hmm. The bank, because of a technical requirement in terms of the number of months that they looked for past revenues, denied him the financial support. Uh-huh. And is that going to be remembered?
Absolutely.
And it'll be remembered by the people at his family. Mm. It'll be remembered by his associates. It'll be remembered on a much broader scale when these stories start coming out. Mm-hmm. And I will also talk to this relative to people individually. And I think people need to think about their legacy and their legacy, not when things are going well, but their legacy in what they did to support others and how loyal they were to others when they needed it most. And it will be a very true test, and people, I think, need to be very conscious of that. So when you're doing self-reflection, do the self-reflection on reality in terms of what happened and how you felt about it. But also reflect on situations where you have not been loyal. And everybody has also experienced that. And I can give you a number of incidences where I was not as loyal as what I should have been. And going through this exercise, not just on loyalty, but on all of the other characteristics, you look back, and don't look back on it in a regretful way. Look back on it and say, okay, what have we learned from that?
Exactly.
And how important is that to us?
That's right.
And think about how in the future you can check yourself to say, wait a minute, I need to just test my loyalty to people.
Andy, thank you very much for sharing those thoughts on loyalty. It's a great one for us to all reflect on. And I hope that you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week when we discuss M is for mindful.
Following the Golden Rule with Andrew Faas is proudly supported by Remax St. Andrews. Live and vacation by the sea. Choose wisely. Choose Remax.